No, it's all true.
Oh, really? Okay. You have to know body parts. You have to know body.
Gentlemen, good morning.
Morning, morning.
I'm going to start the learning sponsors. Okay, if somebody would like to do a big mitzvah,
How big?
just give me a glass of water.
You got it.
That's really big. How big the mitzvahs are.
That's right. No, I just find with the long amudim, you know.
Thanks a lot for morning. Morning. Nobody's your shirt, if you don't mind.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Year of learning, Sarah Alpert in memory of her husband, Harav Tzvi Lipa ben Hillel, Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu ben Yosef Cohen. Friends of Honey Heifetz. Yeah. Friends of Honey Heifetz, Harav Shoshana bat Yusuf. Friends of Jack Prince, Yaakov Yitzchak ben Shmuel. Friends of Sandy Davidoff. Thank you. Shulamit bat Chaim Eliyahu. Friends of Judy Cohen, Yehudit Liba bat Moshe. Friends of Dr. Annette Safransky, Hannah bat Chaim Fischel. Gail and Leslie Kaplan in memory of their parents, Mishka Sprinzer bat Yosef Chaim Bechava. Hanan ben Moshe Eliezer Bechana. Pesha bat Shmuel Yitzchak Halevi Vitzipora. Isher ben Yoel Moshe Cohen Bechana. Friends of Linda Katz, Linda bat Yehoshua and her beloved member. Lee and Harvey Greenberg in memory of their parents, Esther bat Eliezer, Yaakov Yosef ben Abraham, Sarah Rivka bat Baruch Yehuda, Betzalel ben Abraham Alevi. Friends of Rochelle Ebner, Rachel bat Moshe. Ike and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister, Dr. Phyllis Pacheco, the Shabbat Issa. A month of learning by Ruvain and Susan Podolsky in memory of his mother, Fredel bat Shraga Feivel. A week of learning by Lela Bessler in memory of her granddaughter, Penina Margalit bat Dov. By Shirley Weinstein in memory of her husband, Mordechai Ozer ben Yisrael Aharon. Today is the 5th of the month, and therefore we have a day of learning by Milton and Pearl Frank in memory of his father, Chaver Yaakov ben Moshe Va'amalia, by Ari Cohen in memory of his friend Marvin Weinstein. May the Neshamas have an aliyah, Krank Rafia Velti Yeshiva Shemotliah, Mechol ben Israel, a good gebench.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Learning. Yeah.
It will help keep my
Throat from
throat right.
climbing up on you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in yesterday's daf, okay, we got up to a point where we are now going to start today on Yud Chet Amud Bet, 3 lines from the bottom of the Amud. Okay? 3 lines because it says Koletz v'Choltzin. Okay, that's where we're going to pick up. Okay? All right, so just a quick review and then we'll jump back in. And the fact that we're making very clear distinctions between what was, in terms of the status of the Kohen Gadol versus the status of the Melech. Okay? And very clearly, the Mishnah wanted us to understand that regarding the Kohen Gadol, okay, he could testify, okay, and be testified against, okay, right? That was not the case with the king. And we see a number of other distinctions, okay? So we're picking up on that particular point there as well, that the Gemara is telling us choletz v'choltzin, okay, that one may perform chalitza, okay, so a Kohen whose brother is deceased, okay, and okay, all right,
Childless.
and no progeny, no children, okay, v'choltzin, and one can also do chalitza to his wife. Okay, and the Mishnah also indicated there is, however, a limit to that in terms of one thing is chalitza, one thing yibum is a separate element. Okay, let's go on. Kapasik, so the Tana gave a specific, a clear distinction, clear statement. Vatani lo shana min ha'erusin, and he teaches that there doesn't seem to be a difference between erusin v'lo shana min ha'nisuin. That seems to imply that there is no difference in the status of the relationship or the approachability to the woman, if you want to put that language, between somebody who's only, we'll use the word in quotes, betrothed, versus somebody in quotes officially married. Okay? Bishlema min hanisuin, says the Gemara. We understand the viability of this idea, of this statement regarding somebody who's married. Hare aseh velo ta'aseh. There you have a situation where you have a positive command, okay, to marry a virgin, and you have a lav, that says don't marry a widow. Okay, that's the specific. And we go on now to start our Yud Tet, today's daf. Ve'ein aseh, a positive commandment. Okay, doche lo ta'aseh, ve'aseh. Okay, and therefore you don't have a positive commandment that can overturn or overrule, okay, both a negative commandment and a positive commandment together. Ella, but rather, says the Gemara, min ha'erusin, when we're talking about the situation, okay, in this case, of a negative commandment not to marry a widow. Amai, why are we talking about the erusin as a problem? Okay, yavo aseh, let there come the positive commandment, okay, v'yidche lo ta'aseh, and let it overrule, okay, or let the yibum requirement, okay, overrule the status, the negative of the widow, okay? Why? Because the Gemara is now going to give us an answer. Gzera bia rishona, atu bia shnia, okay? Because in essence, regarding the yibum, only the very first act of sexual connection, so to speak, okay, is the mitzvah. Beyond that, it's no longer a mitzvah, okay? And therefore, the rabbis made a gezerah then that lest one continue, okay, the relationship physically, okay, that's a problem. Tanya Nami Hachi, and we have a Braita that teaches similar statement with the following. Im kadmu, if the individual went ahead, uba'alu bi'arishona, and he went ahead and performed the first relations, right? Kanu, then means that he has basically acquired that woman as his wife. Right? Va'asur lekaiman b'bi'ashniya, but nevertheless it is forbidden for him to maintain the relationship with her, lest there be a second active relations. Yes.
Is there a mitzvah to keep having cohabitation until your wife becomes pregnant? No, this is a common goggle.
But we're saying, but there's a tension here. Okay, the tension is, okay, if you say that he can go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah of yibum, but that's only for the sake of the mitzvah. Remember when those of us who learned Yibamot together realized that the original concept was that Yibum would be preferred to Chalitza for the sake of the mitzvah. However, when they began to see that people weren't doing it simply for the sake of the mitzvah, we'll put it that way, then the language of the Gemara there already told us that that's when it became a situation where Chalitza became preferred. Okay. No, I'm not saying, but I'm just referring to that situation.
The mitzvah even is to continue the prodigy of your brother. So maybe there is still a mitzvah.
No, the mitzvah of Yibum is to have one
Child.
act of Liya
One
with your brother's wife, and that
in the
is
hope.
Kinyan, and now she's your wife. After that, if she's a regular
Who's the market share?
All right.
Excuse me,
Okay.
one person at a time.
Right. Okay. So what? So the point. Sorry, a second. All right, so we're gonna. Okay. The point where it's go on, right? For the Kaiman Bibi, so that's the end of that mission. Okay, so now we go to a different topic that we saw in the Mishnah continued with the issue pertaining to death, okay, and mourners, right? So the Mishnah, the Gemara cites mate lo mate, v'chule, okay, if he had somebody that, all right, in that situation, okay. So what happens? Tanu Rabbanan, says the Braita, Umin hamikdash lo yetze. Remember that pasuk was the key pasuk where there was a machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? So what happens? Okay, and now we're coming back to that machloket. Okay? Lo yetze imahem, says the, well, how do we understand it? With them, in other words, with the funeral beer and the others going on. Aval yotzehu achrehen, but he can go out after them. Ketzad, how is that to be done? Hein nechasin v'hu nigla. Okay, they turn the corner. Let's say they're walking down a street. They turn a corner, and then when they're no longer visible, he can be visible. Hein nigli, when they're visible, v'hu nichseh. Okay, he must hide himself. In other words, he must wait when they turn a corner, when they move down a street. Okay, they cannot be traveling with him following the funeral bier immediately, right? V'yotzei ad petach v'chule. Okay, and they can go, according to one view, it said until the gates of the city. Shapir kamar Rabbi Yehuda. No, says the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda's statement that he cannot go outside of the environs of the Beis Hamikdash, okay, that's an appropriate statement, says the Gemara. But Rabbi Meir, remember, was going to challenge us. Amar lach Rabbi Meir, what would he say? Ihachi, if that's the case, logically, leveto nami lo. You can't even then let him go home. He's got to spend all his time in the Beis Hamikdash, if that's going to be your interpretation of that part of the pasuk. Hachi ka'amar, says Rabbi Meir. This is what it's really talking about. Min hamikdash lo yetzeh. When it says from the mikdash he cannot go. Mikedushato, from his condition or his status of sanctity, he cannot leave and not become impure. Because the Gemara told us what was the concern, that out of, we're going to see in a moment, out of grief, he may come too close to the funeral bier and actually have contact with it and therefore be in a state of tumah. Okay? So let's go on, right? Hachi kam, right? Mikdusha tolo yetze. V'kevan da'id le hekera. And since the Gemara tells us there is a kind of warning sign, okay? Namely, keeping the beer out of sight, so he doesn't see it, so therefore he's not going to, this grief isn't going to, right? Lo ate laminga, he's not going to come to have contact with it, to touch it, okay? For Rabbi Yehuda, okay? But Rabbi Yehuda, why did he then nevertheless maintain his view, okay, that the Kohen Gadol cannot leave the precinct, so to speak, of the Beis Hamikdash? Agav merare, because of his, I want to say, bitterness, his grief, right? Dilma makre va'ate v'naga. Okay, maybe he's going to come close and nevertheless have touch it, right? Anyone who's been to a funeral, I'm sure, has seen to what degree that there are people that actually, okay, well, maybe not No, but even I don't mean at the at the
grave.
gravesite. I mean in the funeral home, you'll see
Yeah.
people put their hands on the casket or things like that. Okay, okay, let's go on. Okay, Kashehu menachem. Now, when the Kohen Gadol himself is the mourner, and others come to bring comfort and consolation to him. Tanu Rabbanan, Kashahu over b'shura lenachem achirim. Okay, what about that difference we saw in the Mishnah, that somebody was going to be between him and others? When he is passes in the line to bring comfort to others, skan, the assistant, okay, umashuach, and the one anointed. We're going to learn something from that in a moment. That seems to imply that there are two separate people, but the Gemara is going to tell us shortly that's not the case, right? Okay.
One is,
Okay, unless you consider it the Mashuach Melchama.
no, this is a Kohen who, for whatever reason,
Oh, who had been and no longer in service.
correct, and
Okay.
he,
All right.
because
He's a
of
retired
Ein
Kohen
U'Nidin,
Okay.
he still has the title
Kohen
Kohen
Gadol.
Gadol.
Okay. All right. So we'll come back to that in a second. Thank you for reminding me. Skan u'mashuach. Okay, one is the assistant Kohen Gadol. One is I'm going to use the word previous. Okay, okay, Kohen Gadol. She'avar, okay, bimino, that they pass on his right. V'rosh beit av, and the head of the court. Va'avelim v'chol ha'am, and the mourners and the rest of the people. Mismolo, on his left. Ukeshahu omed b'shura, okay, and when the Kohen Gadol, is the mourner, okay, umitnachem me'achirim, and is receiving consolation from others. Skan memino, his assistant, okay, is on his right. V'rosh beit av, and the head of the court, v'chol ha'am mismolo, are on his left. Right?
There
Okay.
are 24 mishmaras, and the Rosh Beis Av is the oldest, most distinguished Kohen from that
That's
cut.
not right from that.
That's
The,
his, that
it is
Kohen.
it is the it is the group that's on duty that week.
Correct.
Okay, and he is
the
the senior of that group. That's the point. Aval, but notice the Gemara tells us aval mashuach she'avar. Okay, and here now the Gemara tells us no. What we're talking about is the previous, the mashuach here. Okay, was the previous serving Kohen. Okay, well, I don't know what are the past, like the past president you have,
The emeritus.
emeritus, whatever. Okay,
Initial
all right,
Kohen servant,
Enough.
okay.
but in the latter portion of the
They only
second bias, they
bought the
job
position and
had
therefore they
to
didn't do
review
it. Okay, lo ate gabe, he would not come to him. Why? My Tama, what's the reasoning? Chalsha da'ate, okay, because it may be considered a distressing act. Savar ka hadebe, because he may think that he's okay, basically okay, that he's rejoicing at the tragedy of the current Kohen Gadol. Okay, Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, Shmamina miha matnita tlat. From this Mishnah, statement, we learned three things. Shmamina, number one, hainu skan, hainu memuneh. Okay, that really the skan and the memuneh are really one and the same person. Okay, it is somebody who is appointed to be the assistant Kohen Gadol. If the current serving Kohen Gadol cannot, for whatever reason, carry out his duties. Okay, Shmamina, number two. Okay, Avelim omdim v'chol ha'am ovrim. Okay, that the mourners stand, okay, and the people pass by. Remember we said that that's not how we currently do things at the cemetery. Okay, Ushmamina, number three, Avelim l'smol. Okay, Hamenachamim hein omdim, the mourners that are on the left, okay, receive the consolation, right? That's the point.
And we stay in place.
And they remain there. That's why I said it's not again like we do here, okay, currently, where the mourners are the ones who walk through and the people stand. So keep that difference in mind, okay, because the Gemara is ultimately going to tell us, okay, in a moment that there was a change, but that doesn't mean that everybody followed that change. Okay. B'chol ha'am ovrim, and okay, says the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, I'm sorry, Tana Rabbanan. Berishona, originally, Hayu Avelim Omdim, that the mourners stood, V'chol Ha'am Ovrim, and the people go by and console them. Okay? V'hayu Shnei Mishpachot Berushalayim, Mitgarot Zobazon. And there were two families in Jerusalem that conflicted one with the other. Zot Ameret Ani Overet Chila. This family claimed I should pass through first. V'zot Ameret Ani Overet Chila. And this family said I should pass through first. Hitkinu. The rabbis then made an enactment. Sheyehei ha'am omdin, that the people would stand. Va'avelim over. Okay, and the mourners walk through. Okay? Now, a mnemonic device. Chazar v'halach v'siper sima. Okay, let's go on. Amar Rami Bar Abba, he says as follows. What happened? We just saw that the rabbis made an enactment and changed the format, if you will. Okay? However, our Gemara tells us, Hichzir Rabbi Yossi et hadavar liyoshno b'tzipori, that in the city of Tzipori, Rabbi Yossi changed it back to what it was originally, the format. Okay? Shehiyu avelim umdim, that the mourners would stand. B'chol ha'am ovrim. Gemara wants to remind us of what that was. Now, yes. It could be. It could be. Okay. But we're going to see Rabbi Yossi has a tendency to have a das yachid also. Okay. Va'amar Rami Bar Abba, he says, another example. Hitkin Rabbi Yossi b'tzipori, where Rabbi Yossi made a decree in Tzipori. Okay. Shelo tehei isha mahalechet b'shuk ubana achareha mishum ma'aseh shahaya. Okay, that the decree was such that children should not walk behind a mother, but in front of the mother because of a terrible, tragic incident that occurred. If you're using Art Scroll, look at notes number 15 and 16 for more details. Well, they take it from Rashi, I'm sure. Okay, that's the point. Va'amar Rami Bar Abba, we don't have to go into the detail. Okay, since both Rashi and Art Scroll give us that. Va'amar Rami Bar Abba, he says, another example. Hitkin Rabbi Yossi b'tzipori, again, sheyiyu nashim misaprot b'veit hakisei, that women that may be in the Beit Kisei, particularly if it's out in a field, okay, should be talking to one another. Why? Mishum yichud, because of the fear that there could be seclusion between a man and a woman, because if a woman is doing her business in the Beit Kisei and a man has to go, they would still be under the same roof. Okay, and so therefore, so that not to be secluded with a woman in an outhouse out in the fields. Okay, Amar Rav Menashe, says Rav Menashe about Ut. Okay, it happens. Sha'alit at Rabbi Yoshaya. He once asked Rabbi Yoshaya a question. Rabbi Yoshia Rabbah, the great Rabbi Yoshia, Beit Almin the Hutzal, regarding the behavior in a cemetery in Hutzal. Va'amarli, and he said to me, Ein shura pchuta me'asara b'nei adam. Okay, that we do not make a row of less than 10 people. Va'ein avelim min haminyan, and the mourners themselves are not counted as part of that number. Okay? Now, I don't know for sure, but when I was looking at this, it made me wonder about the question of the fact of, could this be the Gemara from which we get the fact that an omen is not able to do any mitzvah? That's probably a different source. Okay, all right.
That's just so very pashut. Osek b'mitzvah.
Patur. Well, maybe. Bein she'avelim umdim v'chol ha'am ovrim, regardless of whether, notice his point is, whether we do the one practice, okay, that the mourners stood and the nation passes by, or they
First.
reverse practice, bein she'avelim ovrim, that the mourners pass through v'chol ha'am omdim. Okay? All right.
I'll mention that we have usually two lines, and the mill go in the
Well,
middle.
because that just makes it easy.
It makes it gives more
There's a big
people.
crowd, now
Okay, elsewhere, remember, you always have question of if you have one line behind the other line, what's the requirements on the people in the first line versus the requirements of the people in the second
that's a
line?
whole mission.
That's a whole Mishnah elsewhere. Okay? Okay, Kishahu mitnachem. When the Kohen Gadol himself is the one that's receiving the comforting, the consolation. Right? Ibayalahu, so they asked, Ki menachem hu acharini. Okay, when we say, right, that he is, okay, comforting others, right? Hechi amar lahu. What does he say to them? Tashma. Listen to the following braita that says, V'hu omer titnachamu. Okay, that he says to them, you be comforted. Okay, Hechi dami. How is that possible? Asks the Gemara. Ilema ki menachame acharene ledidei. If we say when others come and bringing consolation and comfort to him, amar laho ihu tenat kameu. Shall he say then to them that you should be comforted? Okay, nachsha ka rami laho. That's like putting an evil omen on them. Okay.
Remember, they said to him, we will be a kapara fee,
Mm-hmm.
which means that we will take your anguish upon ourselves. So the Gemara is asking, so if he says to them, you should be comforted, it's like saying somebody should die in your family and you should be an Abel.
So that's a pretty straightforward understanding, right? That's why it's an evil omen. What are you telling me I should be comforted if I say it to you? It's like wishing you
Mm-hmm.
okay, ill, exactly. Ela ki menachem la'acharine, but when he brings comfort to others, amar laho, he says to them, titnachamu shmamina. Okay? Nevertheless, that he acknowledges it by saying. Okay? Now we come back to the king. Melech lo dan, when they saw the king is not judging, and they cannot be judged. Amar Rav Yosef, Yosef, lo shanu ela malchei Yisrael. We only said this refers to the kings from Israel. Aval malchei Beit David, but those kings who are really descendants of the house of David. Dan v'daninotan. They judge, and they can judge others. Dichtiv, why? Because we have a pasuk that says, Ubeit David, ko amar Hashem, dino levaker mishpat. As if to say, David, get up in the morning and judge the nation. Okay? Ve'i lo daininin le. And if we don't judge him, inhu hechi daine. How is it possible then that he could judge others? Okay? V'haktiv. But it's written, remember, hit koshushu v'koshu. Remember, we had this the other day, that you should search yourself, correct yourself, okay, and be corrected. Va'amar Reish Lakish, and how did Reish Lakish say it? Right? Kashet, okay, search, right? Atzmacha, do your own self-evaluation first. V'yachar kach kashet acherim, and afterwards do that of others. Ela Malchei Yisrael, but the kings of Israel, Ma'itama, what's the reasoning not? Mishum Ma'aseh Shahaya, because there was a particular incident that happened, right? Namely, right, Da'avde de Yanai Malka, because a servant of King Yanai, Katal Nafsha, killed an individual. Amar Laho Shimon ben Shetach, Kelech Chachamim, and Shimon ben Shetach, who was the head of the Beis Din then, said to the other sages, Tnu Einchem Bo V'nidonanu. Okay, examine the case and we will judge this individual. Shalchule, and they sent to King Yanai, Avdecha, your servant, Katal Nafsha, killed somebody, Shadre Laho, send him to us. Shalchule, he sent him, Ta Ana Nami Lahacha, and then they said, and you yourself also must come to the court at the same time. Why? Because we have the whole story, remember, of Shur Niskal. Okay, and not only does the animal appear to the court, but the owner of the animal has a certain amount of responsibility and must be there. Okay, so what do we see here? The Tana Ananami Lachai, Vehu Ad Ba'alav, citing again the pasuk that tells us that the owner has responsibility to be there when his
Okay, sure.
right? Amra Torah. That's what the Torah says. Right? Okay, so we're following the rule of the Torah that when your property causes damage, the owner has some level of responsibility and must be present. Uba Bal Hashur, V'amod al Shuro, citing the pasuk. Ata, the Ativ. King Yanai came and he sat. Okay? Remember, we've said already a number of times that the king is not permitted to sit with that situation in the court. Az Amarle Shimon ben Shetach. By the way, remember that Shimon ben Shetach was actually the brother-in-law as well of Yanai king. They did not get along, that, to put it mildly. What? Right, right.
So I
They
guess
sought
they did.
together.
Well, that's because his wife intervened. Okay, Yanai Hamelech, Amod al Raglecha. He says to him, Yanai the king, stand on your feet. Okay, via Idubach, and bring testimony. Velo, and Lefanenu ata omed le'ela. That's not before us that you're standing. Ela lefnei mi she'amar v'haya ha'olam ata omed. You're standing before the Almighty. Shnei amar v'amdu shnei anashim asher lehem hariv v'gomer. Okay, citing the pasuk. Okay, amar lo. Yanai's response to Shimon ben Shetach. Okay, lo kashetomar ata. I'm not going to do what you say. Ela kama sheyomru chavercha. But what your colleagues. Right? So what happens as we go along? We'll continue as we can. Nifnei yamino, he looked, will look to the left. Kavshu pneihem b'karka. All the other sages had their face looking down. Okay? What happened? Nifnei l'smolo, look to the right, look to the left. Okay? Kavshu pneihem b'karka. Again, everybody was, okay?
Didn't want to speak up.
Right. Amar lahen, Shimon ben Shetach. So Shimon ben Shetach then says to them, Ba'alei machshavot atem. You're so busy contemplating this situation, so to speak. Yavo ba'al hamachshavot vayifra mikem. Let the master of contemplation settle accounts with you. Okay? Ba Gabriel v'chavtan bekarka v'metu. Gabriel came and struck them all down. Okay? All right. Ba'ota sha'ah. At that same time, because of that incident, Amru, they said, Melech lodan v'lo danino to. The king doesn't judge and doesn't judge us. V'lo me'id v'lo me'idin oto. The king doesn't testify and doesn't testify, others don't testify against him. Now we come back, right? Lo choletz v'lo chotzin v'chulei. Okay, what about chalitza regarding the king? We saw there was something regarding the Kohen Gadol. Now let's see. Aini, is that really the case? Asks the Gemara. V'hamar Rav Ashi. But did not Rav Ashi tell us and teach? Afilu laman amar nasi shemachal al kvodo. Even according to those who say that the prince of a tribe or a leader can give up his status, so to speak, kvodo machu, melech shemachal al kvodo. But a king who attempts to give up his status, okay, Ein kvodo machul. His status is not able to be removed or why? Shnei because we have a pasuk, and remember the pasuk is double lashon. Som tasim. Okay, the fact that it says that alecha melech, namely shetehe emato alecha. Okay, that the king's status should be upon you always. Mitzvah shani. But the Gemara tells us, but in the case of a mitzvah, okay, there's a difference. All right. Next, we go on. Ve'enosin v'chuli. We say you can't marry. Okay, if the king is deceased, the widow of the king. Tanya, and the Braita tells us, Amrula la Rabbi Yehuda. What did the rabbi say to Rabbi Yehuda, who said, oh, no, that they did in the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda said that gave the example that David married wives of King Saul. Exactly. We're going to see precisely what happens. Not, so the Gemara tells us, hold on a second. We know what Rabbi Yehuda said. However, I'm going to slip in here. Nashin haru'uyot lo mi beit hamelech. What it meant was women who were suitable and appropriate within the household of King Saul. Umayninu, and who were they? Meirav umichal. They were the daughters of King Saul, who happened to be sisters. Now, Shalu Talmidav Shel Rabbi Yossi. And so the students of Rabbi Yossi asked the very appropriate shaila. Hey, ach nasa David shtei achayot ke b'chayehem. How is it possible that David could have married two sisters while they're both alive? After all, don't we have something in the Torah that tells us that's a no-no? Okay, what happens? Amar lehem. He said to them. So what?
He killed one of them. No.
Okay, now we're going to see there's two more than one answer suggested. Answer number one, Amar lehen. Okay, so Rabbi Yossi may have given the first answer. Michal achar mitat meirav nasa. Okay,
Really, one was dead.
Okay, one had died and then he married the other one. Okay, now Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha wants to be a wise guy and tells us a different answer. Kiddushay ta'ut hayu lo b'meirav. There was a erroneous, inappropriate, incorrect betrothal that was done, marriage between David and Meirav. Shnei Amar. Why? Because we have a pasuk where David says at one point, Tana et ishti et Michal asher arasti li b'mea arelot plishtim. Okay, that the pasuk says, David is saying, give me my wife Michal, which seems to imply that she was truly his wife, by which I had betrothed her through the use of 100 Philistine foreskins. My Talmuda, how do we explain this? Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, Michal ishti, that Michal is my wife. Velo Marav ishti, and Mirav was not my wife. My kedushay ta'ut. What do we mean then by the fact that it was an erroneous marriage? Dichtiv, because it's written the following: V'haya ha'ish asher yakenu. Okay, Yasrenu hamelech osher gadol v'gomer. Okay, that the king had made a point that whoever strikes him, namely Goliath, okay, the king will reward him with great wealth, implying the daughter of the king would be his wife. Okay, all right, sounds like a James Bond movie. Okay, Azal, he went, cut leg, and he killed him. David went and killed the Goliath. Amarlo, he said to him, Saul now said back to David, Malveh itlach gavai. You have something an outstanding debt, loan, okay, to me. Vahamika,
Yeah.
right? Vahamikadesh b'malva eina mikudeshet. and one who attempts to betroth a woman with an outstanding loan, it's not a valid betrothal. What happens? Azal, right? Yahava Adriel. The king then went and gave her as a wife to Adriel. Dichtiv, as it's written, Vayhi ba'et tate et merav bat Shaul David v'gomer. And this was being done at the time when Merav, the daughter of Saul, was considered to be the wife, okay, or promised to be the wife of David, Vagomer. Amarle said to him, E buy it, or if you want, we could understand it the following manner. De etain lach Michal, that I'll give you Michal. Zil ateli mea orlot plishtim. Go out and for her hand, so to speak, bring me 100 foreskins from the Philistines. Okay, Azal, he went. Itele, he brought them, right? You know how he got them. He wasn't a, I was going to say he wasn't a Moel. Okay. All right. Amarle. Again, King said to him, Malve upruta idlach gabai. Okay, the loan, and the money is owed me. Because the king, we're going to see what happened. Shaul savar malve upruta da'ate amalve, okay, namely that the foreskins weren't worth anything, and so that David still owed him money. Okay, that was his view. V'David's right. V'David savar malve upruta da'ate apruta. That Saul felt that the focus, okay, was on the loan, but David felt the focus was on what? Okay, on the foreskins. V'Abayit Ema. Okay, and namely what? I might say, the Kuli Alma Malve Upruta Da'ate Apruta, that with regards to the loan and the money, his, okay, the focus on the money, Sha'ol Savar, and Saul thought, Lo Chazu Velo Mide, that the foreskins really weren't worth anything.
What are the original owners?
But the David Savar Chazu Kalve Vilashunre. No, that at least you could feed dogs and cats. Right, that's it. Okay, the Rabbi Yossi, okay, but regards to Rabbi Yossi's point, Hi Tana at Ishti at Michal. Okay, but what about the fact that Rabbi Yossi is saying, like this Tana, there was a pasuk, excuse me, that specifically spells out that David seems to be referring to Michal as his wife. How do you understand that? How do you darshan it? Rabbi Yossi Latame. Rabbi Yossi followed his own line of reasoning, right? The Tanya Rabbi Yossi, as Rabbi Yossi taught in the Braita, Hayad Doresh Mikraot Me'uravim, that he used to darshan psukim that were not in from different sections together. Okay, Ktiv, it's written in one place. Vayikach Hamelech et Shnei Bnei Ritzpah, Bat Aya, Asher Yelda LeShaul, et Admoni ve'et Mephibosheth, ve'et Chameshet Bnei Michal, Asher Yelda LaAdriel, Hamechulati ve'Gomer. Okay, citing this whole pasuk, okay, that refers again to having children, and daughter of Shaul, etc. Okay? V'chi,
Came to David
right?
and complained about it.
Right? So what happens? V'chila Adriel natna. Did he give her to Adriel? V'halola palti ben Lachish natna. But don't we have the fact that he actually gave her to somebody else, namely Palti ben Lish? Okay, as it's written elsewhere in another pasuk, right? Namely, Vishaul Natan Michal Bito Isha David, Esha David, I'm sorry there, Lapalti ben Lish. There the pasuk specifically tells us that he took Michal who was considered the wife of David, but gave her to somebody else. Okay? Ela makish kidushe merav la'adriel. But what happened? They make an association. This is how he darshaned. Okay, Rabbi Yossi. He makes an association between the betrothal of Merav to Adriel, the kedushe Michal the Palti, to the betrothal of Michal to Palti. Namely, excuse me, Ma kedushe Michal the Palti ba'avera, the same way that the betrothal of Michal to Palti was a sinful act, I'll put it that way. Af kedushe Merav la'Adriel ba'avera. So likewise, the betrothal of Merav to Adriel was also a sinful act. However, what happens? Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha is back on the scene. Nami Haktiv, isn't also it written, Et Chameshet B'nei Michal Bat Shaul, these 5 children of Michal, the daughter Shaul, Amarlach Rabbi Yeshua. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha would then say, V'chi Michal Yalda, did Michal give birth? V'halo Merav Yalda, but it was Merav who gave birth. Merav Yalda u'Michal Gidla. Okay, that Merav gave birth, but it was Michal who raised them. The Fichach, therefore, says our Gemara, telling us an important lesson, Nikra al Shema, that's why they were called by her name, Lelamedcha, in order to teach us. What? Okay, Shekol hamigadel yatom betoch beto, ma'ale alav hakatuv ke'ilu yaldo. One who raises an orphan, a child without, okay, is as if they gave birth to the child. Okay, so what happens? We're going to go on a bit more, I think. Okay, again, citing another mnemonic device, which is going to give further statements to reinforce this lesson about raising a child or helping educate a child, things of that nature, that concept. Okay? All right, we go on. Okay? Chanina kra Yochanan v'ishto Elazar b'geula shmo b'limud sima. Okay? Rabbi Chanina says, Omer, mehacha, from here, we can learn the same concept from a different pasuk. Namely, vatikrena lo hashchenot shaim lemor yulad ben Naami. Remember in the story of Ruth, she has the kid, but the neighbors all neighborly ladies said, "Oh, it's Naomi's kid." All right, what happens? V'china Ami yalda, and do we say that Naomi gave birth? No. V'hala Ruth yalda. No, it was Ruth who gave birth. Ela Ruth yalda v'Naomi gidla. Okay, rather Ruth gave birth and Naomi helped raise the child. Lefichach nikra al shma, and that's the reason, says Rabbi, right, Chanina, that the child was given associated with her name. Another example, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mehacha. He says we can learn it from the following pasuk: V'ishto haYehudit, and his Jewish wife, Yalda et Yared Avigdor v'Gomer. So who are we talking about? Eila b'nei Batya bat Paro. Okay, Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh. Asher lakach lo Mered. Okay, that he married and had Mered. Mered ze Kalev. Mered is another name for Kalev. Why? V'lama nekra shmo Mered. Why was he given that name or nickname? Shemarad be'etzat meraglin, that he rebelled against the advice, the direction of the 10 tribes who brought Dibat Haaretz. Okay? V'chi kativ yalda. Okay? V'halo yocheved yalda. Does it says that V'chi batya yalda? Do we say batya gave birth? No, it was Yocheved who gave birth. Ela Yocheved yalda hu batya gidla. Lefichach. Okay? Yocheved gave birth, Batya helped raise them. Lefichach nikra al shma. And therefore, again, we could learn that she was raised by that. Another example, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, he says as follows, Mehacha, from this pasuk, Ga'alta bezroa amcha b'nei Yaakov v'Yosef Sela. Okay, that it dealt with the strength of the people for Yaakov and Yosef. V'chi Yosef Yalad, do we say here that Yosef gave birth to the many tribes? Right? V'halo Yaakov Yalad. But it was Yaakov who gave birth to all the children who became the heads of the tribes and the people. Ela Yaakov Yalad v'Yosef Kilkel. Very appropriate with this week's parsha, by the way. Okay? Od Yosef Chai, providing food for family, but not family alone, all of Egypt. Okay? Right? V'Yosef Kilkel, lefichach nikra'u al shmo. And therefore they are associated with his name. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan. Another example, he says, Kol hamilamed ben chavero Torah. Okay, one who teaches the children of his neighbors, so to speak. All right, ma'ale alav hakatuv ki'ilu yeldo. Okay, attributed to him, it's as if he gave birth to him. Right? Shnei Amar. Why? Because we have another pasuk. Ve'ela toldot Aharon u'Moshe. These are the generations of Aaron and Moses. Uktiv, and then it's also written, Ve'ela shmot b'nei Aharon, that these are the names of the children of Aaron. Lomar lach, they're able to tell us, Aharon yalad, u'Moshe limed, Aaron gave birth, Moshe taught them, lefichach nikra'u al shmo. Therefore they were called after his name. Lachain, therefore, Ko Amar Hashem El Beit Yaakov Asher Pada et Avraham. And likewise a pasuk that says, Hashem called the house of Jacob after he redeemed Abraham. How could it be that Yaakov would have redeemed Abraham? Vechi Hechan Matzinu. How we can find possible that Yaakov Shepda'o the Abraham, that he redeems or saves Abraham? Amar Rav Yehuda, what did he do? Shepda'o mitzar gidu banim, that he redeemed him from the difficulty of child raising. V'hainu dichtiv, and that's why it's written, Lo ata yivosh Yaakov v'gomer, that not now should Yaakov be ashamed. V'lo ata yavush Yaakov me'aviv, that he should not be ashamed from his father. V'lo ata panav yachzoru me'avi aviv. Yachvoru me'aviv. Right, shouldn't be embarrassed from before his father's father, namely Abraham. Okay, we're going. Now, another little piece. Kativ Palti. We see his name is written Palti. Kativ Paltiel. But otherwise, also his name is written Paltiel. Okay? What is that? Why? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he says, Palti Shmo. Palti was his name. V'lamanikra Shmo Paltiel. But why was he called, okay, Paltiel? Right? All right, why that? Shapaltu. Shapaltu Kel min ha'avera. That Hashem saved him from a sin. Ma'asa, what did he do? Okay, na'atz cherev beino leveina. He embedded a sword, okay, in the, let's say,
Sword
on the bed between him and Michal, right? And what happened? And Amar kol ha'osek b'davar zeh yidkar b'cherev zeh. Whoever has relations with her, let this sword run him through. Okay? Vaktiv. But isn't it written elsewhere? Vayelech ita isha. Okay? That he went with his wife, implying she was his wife. He explains it. Shneasala ki isha. That he treated her. Okay? He supported her and cherished her as if she were his wife. Vaktiv. And it's also written, halach ubacha al ha-mitzvah da'azil mineh. Okay? That he cried about his lack of opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah.
This is the incident
Right,
when
that he
David
had to
took her back.
give her that
He
when
walked
David
with
took
her.
her back, right? Ad bechurim shenasu shnehem ki bechurim. Okay, it was as if the two of them were like young boys. Namely, shelo ta'amu ta'am bi'ah, that they did not have any sense of what the copulation would be. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, this is Rabbi Yochanan, Tokfo, this is we're finishing up, Tokfo shel Yosef, okay, the triumph, I'm going to use that translation, of Yosef, Anvatanuto, was more modest than that of Boaz. Tokfo shel Boaz, and the triumph of Boaz, Anvatanuto, shel Palti ben Lish, was not as modest as that of Palti ben Lish. Why? The Gemara is going to tell us. Tokfo shel Yosef, the triumph of Yosef, Danvanuto shel Boaz, was less modest than that of Boaz. Why? Dichtiv, Vayhi bechatzi halayla, v'yecharad ha'ish, v'yalaf. Okay, that regarding Boaz, the pasuk tells us it was during the middle of the night, and he trembled and he turned. Okay, my v'yalaf. What does it mean? He turned. Okay, we're going to see now a little X-rated section of the Gemara. Okay, Amar Rav, says Rav, Sheneaseh b'saro kiroshe lefatot. Okay, that basically his flesh turned hard like the head of a turnip. Okay, explaining that although he was aroused, okay, he refrained because remember Ruth was a unmarried woman and she was lying there at his feet and almost in his bed. Okay, whereas what happened with Yosef, okay, namely Yosef, she was a married woman, okay, but she wasn't already lying with him. She was trying to seduce him, okay, and therefore that was the point. By the way, Art School has a note there, number 51, if you want more details. Okay, and just to finish up, okay, all right. Tokfo shel Boaz and Venuto shel Palti ben Lish on the top of Tuf, Kida Amrinin, as we say, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, Mai Dichtiv, Rabot Banot Asu Chayil, Vi'at Alit Al Kulana, Rabot Banot Asu Chayil, Ze Yosef, Uboaz, Va'at Alit Al Kulana, Ze Palti ben Lish. Okay, and we'll stop right there. Really? I was busy with the Gemara last night, so I didn't go to the movie. Hey, yes, sir. What? You've been married long enough, Bob, to know 1 year old.
By the way, people have asked about the AED training, and that is on Tuesday at 2 p.m. in the West Wing with the AED training, the defibrillators. But you should go and RSVP.
Okay, thank you for the reminder.
And the Sanuso, we
Yeah.
find it also in that Maisa of Kamsa Bar Kamsa, when it criticized that one of the Tanayim who didn't want to kill him, right? He said, "Oh no, don't kill him." So it's called Anba Sanuso. What is it?
Extreme modesty.
Extreme modesty, right?
Right, think of Anav.
Yeah.
So his sense of modesty was.
But there the Gemara is using a little different. Like, he overdid it.
That's the question.
Right.
The whole question is, under what circumstances is it all right to be more modest? Is it better? There were some famous Rebbeim that would say, and I think the Rav was one, that it's one thing to be machmir on yourself. Does that always mean that you have to be machmir on others?
Sort of insight into what happened with Shimon Green. My question is that I took him out to lunch a week ago, and we were and the next thing he said, sounds great, I'm glad that, you know what? Next thing I knew, he calls me and he says, it's all off, forget about it, and I'm not giving the shit anymore, Yeah, okay.
But he implied that only after that conversation with you did he realize how much he really would like to and why didn't he call? I said, the family never can leave us alone. And he said he was going to him. Then he went home. And so I'm like, my always try to fix me. Speak to your father. I said, I didn't say to him, I wasn't threatened. I said, but I didn't say to him, did you ever respond to that request?
Because he claimed to me he never received any communication from the committee at all. He said he processed with the
Avi
Navy
sent out, yes, the process, and they were the ones, and they were the ones who said he's got to ask them to get the decision. Sent out the members of the committee.
He told me he asked me to present him if I knew about that.
Yes. I went with him. Do you understand? He told me that simple. Somebody says to you, I'd like to see a copy of your check. You have a document, don't you make a copy? They never responded to it.
So he claims he never got that email? Is that what he said? Because he said he never heard back from the committee at all. So you told me that.
Avi sent copies of that. When that was raised, he sent copies of that email to the committee. Now,
That raises.
wait. I'm going to go on. Okay. So we discussed. And we basically felt, as a scholar, he was outstanding. We have no sense of he has a strong experience, and that was the point.
Sure.
Now, I sent a email to a nephew, who also has smicha from Zalman Lechem.
My son also has smoking from.
I said, do you have a document or something? His response to me was, I really don't know. Because it's not common unless you go through the rabbinate.
Zalman Lechem didn't give any sort of certificate?
So, okay. Now, I know that there's more than one school that they were gowns and red roof. Okay, so they're next to the last year of Hawaii. And they went and attended some of his shiurim and supposedly got smicha from him.
He gave it out on different parts. He gave out a smicha on Shabbos. He gave it a smicha on this and that, on topics.
Whatever.
Yeah, okay.
And
There was a little bit of playing around.
They still do that in places.
Really?
I'm going to tell you how I know. So But my nephew couldn't recollect it. Now I knew from that sometimes, aside from that if a fellow needed a document for a job, then the Rav would write a letter. Whether it's Zalman Nehemiah or whomever, was the master.
Okay.
So, so the point is that out of the blue he called me on Friday. Why didn't you call me and tell me? I said, what do you mean
Why
call
don't you
me?
come and tell me what?
I said,
What was his time now? Why didn't
why don't I call him?
tell? Yeah.
Tell him what was going on. I said, he's chairman of the committee, that's his responsibility. He indicated that he sent you email.
Right.
I don't remember.
Oh, now it's I don't remember. Because he told me was I never received anything. Okay.
And plus and people like this and that. Why? What is all this? I said, it was not my address. Your friend, which reminds me, I hate to say it, of the all Israeli vitamin P, Protexia. What are you talking about? But he would talk and talk and really just talk. But I was speaking to so many others and
Right. Well,
okay. And I asked him, I had said to him, I mean, I met with him more than a week ago. You know, 15 minutes we talked on the subject, and for 45 minutes he gave me stories.
I know.
And
He's very, yeah. He has a very big need to be heard.
so, and so on Friday, we called him, you know, Friday, you know, I helped you, and I talked to you together. He told me, I mean, and then I said, what did you turn around? Group, even though you talk to people in the army, write numbers.
Oh, so basically what I'm hearing is that he's insulted. He's sulking because he doesn't feel he was treated right. And he deserves better
Now,
treatment.
do I say that we should have called him sooner? In other words, what happened is because after his conversation with you, he realized, oh, I guess I need to find out what's going on. So he called Friday, and that's when I went back to him. Yeah, I told him that I never received your sticker, and therefore the assumption was you were no longer interested in the position.
It's a credible answer, credible, you know. So he's making this sound very personal.
Okay, now, what's interesting is that when you look at past situations, last go around, the committee made a rule. We will not entertain anyone who's currently part of the congregation applying for the position.
Oh,
Because he felt that it was somebody, on that example that I told you. And I have said this, if you're not going to have anything to do with it, oh, it's going to be probably, but there are things I said, you mean to tell me that when Tony Fallon was coming, you're not going to come in? You mean to tell me when Jacob Jackson was coming, you're not going to come in here?
what were you debating
I
today?
challenge.
No, but why? You
No.
challenged him because he was giving you, he was making a statement of, okay, that's it, had nothing to do with this rule. Did he make such a statement? You really want to put that. Yeah, he could hardly talk to me when I try to reach him. It's a real shame. I think it's a combination of an innocent,
Two Here, Avi made a mistake by not following personally.
Right.
Okay?
He touched the nerve.
By
And I
now,
think as a very strong nerve
eyes
is
very
broken.
sensitive.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I thought when you were by not getting recorded, they did miss who the document after a while.
Mm-hmm.
You probably should have picked up the phone and called him directly.
By the way, I'm still hoping to receive your
Something.
right.
But on the other hand, Shimon was really hot on the subject. Why did it wait till when he had a conversation with you? What happened all those entry on time? And the only reason he stayed with you tonight is because initially people were advocating.
But then he got me very speechless with put down on the rock. And that's what I'm supposed to have already stayed with him.
Well,
And he had said to me that he's going to put together a whole proposal. That's what I was waiting for. The whole thing. So I'll lay it receipt. So hopefully they'll come around.
let me say something. You know, I mean, personally, I felt a little bit insulted that he was, attacking me.
How did he attack you?
Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you do something?
I said,
If I had told him how many times in the meeting I raised the question about why don't you let me say, don't see any success. These people you were asking about, he must have been, he had something in common with him that he was maybe pushed on new issues and things like that. Yeah, I didn't understand the need to have any real tough
right, he
time.
went to be tough that we need to.
Hmm?
But it would be great if, after all this, we can come to a place with him where he is available as a knowledge
I
student.
don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
Okay. I asked him to be a member of the education team
Mm-hmm.
before I left crazy.
No, he's a logical person.
Would be that
Right.
that he would have good input
Mm-hmm.
to programs, in my view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so bottom line is he became tough.
I,
He has left me a little bit.
I the retirees.
Where is this, by the way?
In Armona Mitzvah.
Okay.
And started sitting in with them and participating in their shiur.
The Sephardi Foundation?
Yeah, it's a kollel, and the shiurim were given by guys from the kollel to the retirees. And one of the guys from the kollel acts as the rabbi for the adjunct congregation, adjunct shul. So I happened to ask him, it's not true. There are different tracks in the kollel. Somebody's track is in Tefillah. Somebody has a track in Shabbos. Somebody else is in a track for the Rabbanut. I said, we need the Rabbanut. He says, well, they're learning certain material to be able to take the test.
The full Rabbanut Tznuta is a big deal. A lot of years to see it.
So, as you know, I wasn't interested in that because I get my own learning and so I'm not sure whether he has a, let's say, more limited sneaker, but he, has, I assume from that, but again, if somebody goes through the takes all five of those classes,
The solid state.
okay, they're gonna have some sort of document. Okay, signed by, but if he did his sneaker, on track tefillah, I think on
But that's how Reb Zalman Nachman gave.
I don't disagree.
That's how he gave. And that's why when over the years, I would hear somebody say, oh, he's a technique from the Zalman Nachman. And that was like, okay.
But I know for a fact that guys in those would get studying, get a letter from him. So at least from there, when he was in senior year at YU and he was looking for a job,
Right. That's what
they could show
But
him.
go to the Kollel in Miami. Almost all the young men that are there are all called rabbis. Just by the fact that they're, I have a grandson-in-law, Katie Bereshansky. He became Rabbi Bereshansky like on a Monday morning. I mean, it's like they're not makshiv like you and I from YU that it was a solid program for 3 years and now it's 4 years. At the end of which you got smoother. It's a different approach. Okay. But we would be mindful of that, right? We would be mindful of that if there was a clear give and take communication between him and your committee, open kimono type of communication, and evidence of pastoral capability and experience. At least that wouldn't be a big sticking point, right?
I think I heard from Perry this morning that last time he checked it was about 70. 70? Thank you. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Now I understand better. My sense is that he is, let's call it personality, he needs a lot of study. He needs to hear that he's really something special that he recognizes his speciality. Because in my time with him so far, which has been cumulative, 95% of it was, despite the question I might have asked or a comment I might have made, it was all coming because something really good stuff. So I knew that I had done it. But
When he would give the shiur, he would tell stories.
yes.
Which people enjoy.
Right.
Things like that.
Right.
But what we can do is have position, non-time position, even though.
Right.
I think, I'm not saying he didn't prepare, but I'm saying he could read the commentary there could be a situation where, you know, something comes to the, like God never said, right? Very yomi. But he's not going to necessarily deal with, it's a more mundane none of them very ravenous. It's trained in anything transformed.
Like what I'd say all the time.
Yes, they are. What makes them so unique? Because he's marginalized. They also have the awareness that people feel that is happening. And what you listen to is something that is reality, something that was looked on, the answer their concern, or something. That's what made them unique. So when you meet
And they recognize
people
that our
from
output is not only black or white, but that it's also situational. Okay, fine. I have a share at 10, so I gotta go. But thank you very much. Very helpful because it's, sitting around in my head, if I do something, should I have handled them differently? Why did he suddenly close himself down? So no.
and yet, I feel bad, but at the same time, to, acknowledge the fact that you weren't on top of the situation either. Why did it take, and I just said, why did it take this time that he met with you a week or two ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever, before he realized, oh, I haven't heard him. Maybe I should have.
Get himself.
Right. No, that shouldn't have been the case because he, he traveled during the night. His son is a pilot, and therefore he's the son of a but he got a family. Maybe they could. That's the only thing I can think of. I just mm-hmm. And depends on what
Right.
Israel. Way back, I think it's probably 1974.
I was about killer basic for vegetarian.
Oh, really?
I
That
ate
was when
wild.
Rabbi McKenzie was still
Yes,
alive.
I ate wild. His son-in-law was a sneaker student at YU, and I did a public for him.
Yeah.
I was a young married at that time, and I was doing these things in Russia and different. And so I was chosen to be in the main menu. I came and I stayed with Rabbi Bornstein. You know Reverend Bornstein?
I knew the name. I
Yeah,
didn't know.
he was a big short, a big Democrat. And I got a little insight into San Diego State's politics. And the young people from
Oh, really? Yeah.
Morty, the older brother, was my classmate at Charles,
Uh-huh.
and Mikhail, who comes here from university, his younger brother, he also quite.
All right, take care. No problem. Hello there. How are you? Good morning.